Okay, Shavua Tov, everyone. Last week we had an interlude. We spoke about the, what did we speak about last week? We spoke about anti-Zionism last week, didn't we? Instead of the Shmuel Aleph Shir. That turned out to be one of the most popular shiurim that I've given on YouTube. Quite a lot of people found that interesting. So there you go. I think that speaks volumes. So we're back to Shmuel Aleph. The last time we spoke about Shmuel Aleph, we mentioned the amazing story of Major Vivian Gilbert of the Allenby troop, part of Allenby's brigade, who used our chapter of Tanakh to wage war against the Ottomans in 1917. So that was what we spoke about last time, and I think everybody agreed that was an absolutely amazing story, that the Tanakh could be used as a war manual for the First World War. Quite remarkable. So let's go back and pick up the story where we left off. Where we left off was the story of Jonathan and his armor bearer. This was obviously the story that Gilbert read. He went up the path, this secret path between two craggy rocks, took the Pelishtim by surprise, killed a bunch of them, caused panic, and they all started running away. That's something which has been repeated over history a number of times as well.
There was a great picture in the Jerusalem Post, Johnny, of that mishmash this week.
Yes, let me see if I can find that. I know you sent it to me on WhatsApp. Let me see if I can find that and show it to everybody.
It's on the photograph page of the Jerusalem Post.
Yeah, but it's also on my WhatsApp because you sent it to me.
Yeah. It's really terrific.
There we go. Let's see if I can enlarge that and show it you on the screen. Okay, let me see if I can share that screen with you. 1 second. Yes, I think I can. Let me know if you can see that, everyone. In a second, it should come up. Yeah. Okay, yeah. That was a photograph in the Jerusalem Post this week, which Johnny found and sent to me. And what it's the caption on it was, I'll just read it to you. Hang on a sec. I've lost it now. Lost the connection. Here we go. The connection, the caption at the bottom of that photograph in the Jerusalem Post says, "Today the sun shines over a peaceful landscape, but in biblical times it was here King Saul defeated a far larger Philistine army in Michmash." Not actually true, that is it? Because it wasn't King Saul that defeated the Philistine army. It was Jonathan.
Yeah.
And we're going to see that now. Let me just let Charlotte in. We're going to see that now because we're going to pick up the story. We're going to pick up the story in Shmuel Aleph chapter 14, verse 23 is where we're going to start from. This is where we ended last time. What I showed you last time was that there were huge parallels in the language of this chapter to Kriyat Yam Suf, to the splitting of the Red Sea, and the Shirat Hayam, the song of the sea, Az Yashir Moshe, which was sung afterwards. And what we showed was this verse 23 was one of those parallels. So let's just begin today with what we ended on last time, verse 23, Leon.
So Hashem saved Israel on that day, and the battle passed by Beit Aven,
Okay, Vayosha Adonai Bayom Ha'u et Yisrael. That's a very familiar pasuk to us, and it carries on in the Shirat Hayam, or just before the Shirat Hayam, Vaya Yisrael et Mitzrayim Metal Sfat Hayam. And so this was the subject of last time, that we see the parallel of the greatest miracle that the Bnei Yisrael saw, which was Kriyat Yam Suf, is alluded to in this chapter through Jonathan. But now we're going to go on and pick up the story on verse 24.
The people of Israel were hard pressed on that day, and Saul adjured the people, saying, "Cursed be the man who shall eat food until the evening, when I shall be avenged of my enemies." So the entire people...
Oh yeah, carry on, finish the pasuk, sorry.
So the entire people did not taste food.
Okay, so it's on the screen for you now. Can you see it there on the screen? Yeah? Yeah, okay. So it's verse 24. So let's just start at the beginning. Ve'ish Yisrael nigas bayom hahu. And the men of Israel were hard pressed on that day. How did you translate it, Leon?
Were hard pressed on that day.
Pressed. Okay. It's an unusual word, this nigas. It means that they were troubled. They were in difficulties. Presumably says Rav Steinsaltz, from fasting, because they were fasting on that day. I'm not quite sure what that really means, because the fasting bit is about to happen now. So I'm not quite sure what Rav Steinsaltz is getting at when he says they were hard from fasting. I guess those of you who have served in the army, any of you served in any army? I never did. No? No. Well, if you speak to people who served in the army, they'll tell you that it's hard work fighting. And I guess that they were hard pressed on that particular day because of the battle. So Saul adjured the people. He made them swear. And isn't it interesting how often what we learn is so tied in with all the other things that we do around the time, the Sedra of the week, the events of the week. Look at the word that is translated as adjured in this pasuk. Vayoel Shaul et ha'am. Vayoel Shaul et ha'am. What's that remind you of? Leslie, you're muted.
I'm not there, sorry.
Vayoel Shaul et ha'am. What does that remind you of that we were talking about last week? Well, first of all, we have this word adjured in English. When was the last time you used the word adjured in English? Probably not very often, but we had it 3 times in last week's shiur, the word adjured. What did we talk about last week?
Shir Hashirim, wasn't it?
Yes, we talked about Shir Hashirim, correct. We spoke about the 3 oaths on which the anti-Zionism of the Haredim, and particularly Satmar, is based. That was the entirety of the shiur last week, was based on the 3 oaths in Shir Hashirim. And do you remember who the gentleman, I use that word advisedly, was who interpreted the 3 oaths to mean that Zionism was the worst sin you could possibly do and had to give up your life instead of actually doing it? Who was that?
Teitelbaum. Teitelbaum.
Yes, and what was his first name?
Yoel.
Yoel, that's right. And what was his book called that he wrote this in?
Hilchas
Yes, it was
Yoel.
called Vayoel Moshe.
Yeah.
Vayoel Moshe. And this word Vayoel It's a shame. Maybe David can correct me if I'm wrong. If Ruby was here, he would be able to tell me. I think that there are only two places in the whole of Tanakh where this word Vayoel appears. One of them is Vayoel Moshe, when he is staying with Yitro, and that's the verse that Yoel Teitelbaum used for the title of his book. And the other time is here, Vayoel Shaul. Shaul made the people swear. It's an unusual word. David Marks, if you've got a concordancia handy, maybe you can look it up for us and tell us whether the word Vayoel appears anywhere else in Tanakh. I don't think it does, and if it does, it's not very common. So again, there we are, a very unusual word which comes up today, having been used as the basis of the entire shiur on a completely different subject last week. Amazing. Vayoel Shaul. And Shaul made the people swear. He adjured the people. And he says like this. This is what he made them swear. He made them take an oath. Or he said an oath, in fact. Arur ha'ish. Cursed is the man. Asher yochal lechem ad ha'erev. Who will eat, what is lechem?
Bread.
Bread.
How is it translated in your translation, Leon?
Nectar. Well, at this
Nectar.
point, it only says food.
Okay, food. Okay, yochal lechem. So it's translated as food, is it in yours, in this verse?
Yes.
And here it is also food. What is the modern Hebrew word for food?
Ochel, isn't it?
Ochel. Ochel. Actually, the emphasis is on the first part of the word. If you say ochel, like you said it, it's a verb. But if you say ochel with the stress on the o, it's the correct word. With the stress on the o, ochel is food. Lechem is bread. So that's an interesting thing, isn't it? That both our translations have translated this as food. What's the biblical Hebrew word which is used for food?
Mazon, isn't it?
Mazon, correct. And where do we see that? Where do we read that word very, very often? You might even have said it this morning already.
Benching.
Yes, benching. What is the Hebrew name for benching, which of course is Yiddish word?
Hamazon.
Birchat Hamazon, the blessing of food. So when you say I'm laboring this point a bit now, but when you say your bracha on your bread before you eat, what do you say? Hamotzi lechem min haaretz, who brings bread from the ground. So lechem means bread, but it's translated here as food. I wonder why. Park that thought that lechem here is translated as food, because I'm going to ask you a question. We may not even get to it today, but I'm going to ask you a question which is going to be relevant to this point. So park that idea at the moment that lechem here is translated as food in our English translations, both of them. So
I think from what I remember from school, the Christian assembly, they said, give us our daily bread, which was meant to be food, I think. Yeah. I mean, lechem is a generic term. Yeah. It means bread, but it's a generic term. It's used as a generic term for food. And you'll see in the end why I'm laboring this point about lechem. But for the moment, I just want you to note that lechem is translated here in its generic form of food, as opposed to its specific translation of bread. So Shaul says, cursed be the man who will eat lechem ad ha'erev, before the evening. V'nikamti me oivai, and I will be avenged from my enemies. V'lo ta'am kol ha'am lachem, and none of the people tasted bread.
So he made them make an oath. He made an oath saying, anybody that eats lechem before tonight and before I have avenged my enemies will be cursed. What does it usually mean when you say somebody is cursed in the Bible? What does it mean in biblical terms?
They're going to get it.
Yes, what are they going to get, Johnny?
A plague, maybe.
Worse than that.
Wrath.
They're going to get worse than that.
Yeah.
They're
Death.
going to die.
Death. Yeah, yeah. Aror ha'ish. Cursed is the man who does X, Y, and Z. And that means, that curse means that's a death sentence. He's going to be put to death. That's what it means. When he says Arur ha'ish, cursed is the man, he's saying that anybody who eats between now and the end of this battle tonight is cursed and is going to die. That's the king's statement. It's an oath. An oath. Vayoel Shaul. Shaul made them make an oath. And he said this. David, have you got an answer for us?
Yeah, it appears a number of times.
What a shame.
Yeah, the next, in fact, the Concordance doesn't even quote our pasuk. It quotes the next one, Shmuel Aleph 17:39.
Okay, all right. Well, okay. I still think it's an unusual.
It is unusual. You've got right at the beginning of Sefer Devarim, Ha'il Moshe.
Correct. Yes, but it's not that. I was looking at.
No. I know you're looking for Vayael. Yeah.
Yeah. Vayoel with a cholam. Okay. Yeah. It's still an unusual word, but it's not.
Yeah.
It's
not that unusual.
Not that unusual. Okay. Fair enough. All right. So, be that as it may, Shaul has made an oath, and he has said the person who eats food is going to be put to death. Let's go on and see what happens. Nobody ate, says so. Then verse 25, Leon.
Then all the people of the land came into the forest, where there was nectar on the surface of the field.
Okay, let's just stop there for a second. V'chol haaretz ba'u vaya'a. And all the land came into the forest. Doesn't really make sense, which is why on the screen you've got in brackets. Have you got in brackets as well in there?
Yes. The people of.
Yeah, the people of are in brackets because it's not what it says. The verse says, and all the land came into the forest, which doesn't make sense. So it's understood to mean the people of the land came into the forest. Why?
Safaria says something quite different to that.
Go on.
Says, everybody came to a stack of beehives where the honey had spilled on the ground.
Oh, you just spoiled my question.
Oh, whoops.
The question I was about to ask, Michael has just answered. Because I was about to say, the people came into the forest, Vayihi Dvash al Pnei Sadeh, and there was honey on the face of the field. Translated here, on the ground. What have you got, Leon?
On the face of the field.
On the face of the field. That's a literal translation.
I
was going to ask is...
It's hyphenated, on the surface of the field.
The surface of the field, okay. Pnei Sad, on the surface of the field. What I was going to ask, which Michael has now answered, is why would there be honey lying about on the surface of the field? Why would there be honey on the ground? And Michael, would you like to say that again for us, please? I won't interrupt you this time.
Everybody came to a stack of beehives where some honey had spilled on the ground. Yeah,
so when you have beehives, then you have to, you have these what do they call them? These they're like
nets.
No, they're like
nets on the pole.
Trays. They're like vertical trays of honey. Let me just show you something.
A honeycomb.
Honeycomb, thank you. Why can't I speak properly today? It's great. Let me just see. I need to just reconnect my WhatsApp again, and I'll show you something which I'm trying to explain to you. So these beehive things, according to Safaria, which is based on the Mephorshim, they were overflowing with honey, and the honey was on the ground. Now, it's important to know that the honey was on the ground for the next bit of the story. Let me see if I can show you something. One sec.
They're called honeycomb trays, as you said, a tray.
Honeycomb trays, yeah, they're sort of vertical things, aren't they? Hang on a sec, just want to try and show you this if I can. Can't find it.
Rashi says sugar cane.
Right.
Sugar cane.
According to the most Mephorshim, it was honey from beehives, and I'm just trying to find this thing and I can't find it. So I'm going to abandon it in one sec.
Dvash is definitely honey, isn't it?
Yeah, Dvash is honey. No, I can't find what I was trying to show you, but it doesn't matter. So we'll carry on and we'll see. So this honey has fallen out of the beehives and it's on the ground. Okay, that's where we are up to. So,
Johnny.
Yes.
Yeah, about the words in brackets. There's a note here that it's not the only time we find this expression used when we need to insert the word ha'am. If you have a look in Parashat Miketz, Bereshit 41:57, v'chol ha'aretz ba'u el Yosef. When they came to collect grain from Yosef in the famine.
Very good, very good. What chapter was that?
Chapter
41.
41. Let's get it up on the screen.
57.
Yeah.
41. Chapter 41, 57. Okay. I don't know if you've got that on the screen. Have you got my screen at the moment? Yeah. There we go. Okay. So here on my translation, I've got and in brackets the inhabitants of the land. V'chol ha'aretz ba'u. Exactly the same expression. Yes. And all the land came to Mitzrayim. Somehow or other, that sort of makes more sense to me than the other one without the inhabitants, because at the time Egypt was the only place that had food. So you could translate that as V'chol ha'aretz, the whole world came to Egypt to get food, or the whole, so I don't think I would have.
Yeah, but then in both Pesukim, you've got the verb in the plural, ba'u.
That's true. That's true. Ba'u is in plural. That's right. That is true. So you have to say it's a plural thing. V'chol ha'am ha'aretz. Am ha'aretz. Okay, great. Thank you for that. So another parallel. Always like a good parallel. Right, let's go back to Shmuel Aleph. So there was honey on the ground. So what? Verse 26.
The people came to the forest, and behold, there was an oozing of nectar, but no one put his hand to his mouth, for the people feared the oath.
Okay, now that's interesting on a number of points. Vayavo ha'am el haya'ar. Here we've actually got that the people came. Although looking at that, David, I'm not sure that putting am in front of ha'aretz helps you with your verb, because vayavo ha'am, am is singular. The people is like the nation, it's singular. So I'm not sure it would help. V'chol ha'am ha'aretz, v'chol am ha'aretz, ba'u, don't know. Am is singular. You would expect it to have said vayavo'u ha'am if that was the case. But anyway, we don't need to get too hung up.
I've actually got troops here, but obviously it's not a proper translation.
No, the troops is what they were, but as you say, the translation is the people. So they came to the forest. The hine. This is an interesting word, isn't it? Helech dvash, a going. Helech means to go, right? From the word lalechet. Ani holech, I go, I walk. Helech dvash, a going of honey. It gives you the impression of flowing. There's like a flow of honey. Is that how you translated it, Leon? Flow of honey?
No, on 2 points, it's not translated like that. They've translated what have I got here? The stones, what is my
the art scroll?
Art scroll. I couldn't think of the word. The art scroll translates it. There was an oozing of nectar.
Okay. So an oozing of nectar. I think oozing gives the impression of motion. So I'm okay with that. You've got a flow, have you got there, Michael, in Safari? And we've got a flow here. I think all of those translations are good because the word helech, it comes from the word lalechet, which is to go. It indicates some kind of movement. Now, dvash, we've got here as honey, and you've got nectar. Now, when we say honey in English, what do we normally understand? We normally understand bees' honey, don't we? Yeah, I mean, I don't know about you. When somebody says to me, honey, I think of that. That was what I was trying to show you. I think I have another go at trying to show you this thing with the honey.
But when the Torah speaks of honey, it speaks of dates.
Yes, and now that's what I'm coming to, Marcel. That's what I'm coming to. Can't find this now.
Also, I was just thinking, when it says Am Haaretz, does it not mean the peasants?
Am Haaretz doesn't mean the peasants. It's become to mean the peasants. Is, you know, and Am Haaretz is a person of the people, as opposed to a scholar. So, but actually here it means literally the people of the land. And as Michael said, it means the troops, because we're talking about these soldiers. That's who we're talking about right now. It's Shaul's soldiers. They're the ones that he made swear that you can't eat anything until we've finished this battle. So they came to this and they saw this Helech Dvash. Now, we think of the word honey to mean bees' honey. That's what we normally mean. But Marcel is quite right. Where do we come across the word Dvash most commonly in the Torah?
A land flowing with milk and honey.
A land flowing with milk and honey. Eretz, Zavat, Chalav, Dvash. Okay, what is that honey that they are talking about? It's not a good translation.
Date honey. Date honey.
And that really is nectar. That's what nectar is. Nectar is another word for fruit juice. You can actually, if you go into one of the supermarkets here and you ask for nectar, that's what you'll get. You'll get fruit juice. Nectar is a word which means fruit juice, and in biblical Hebrew, dvash is certainly in the Torah when it's referring to Eretz Israel. Eretz Zavat Chalav Dvash, as Marcel says correctly, refers to date honey. or date juice or date nectar. And that's why your translation, Leon, uses the word nectar. But if we're going with the idea that this was flowing out of the beehives, then honey is a better translation than nectar, because nectar from dates, how would that get on the ground? Unless you had, I suppose you could have loads of dates that had fallen off, couldn't you? Could have dates that had fallen off the tree. That's another option. That maybe the Helech Dvash, this flowing of nectar, was because of dropped dates that had dropped off the tree. So it could be that.
There's another aspect, Johnny. Nectar is referred to later on, obviously centuries later, as the food of the gods. Nectar and ambrosia is the food of the Greek and Roman mythical gods. And to me, it's an incorrect translation altogether, unless obviously they're using this nectar going into the supermarket now and asking for nectar, and that's what you get.
What do you think the gods were eating when they were eating their nectar and ambrosia?
It referred, I think, mainly to just food generally.
Okay, Stuart, what were you saying there? Sorry, missed you.
Two things that worry me. Who built these beehives? I don't think they were sophisticated enough. In our minds, we see these wooden things where people pull out the things, but they were sophisticated enough to build. I don't know who built them, but bees build their nests in trees, and they're like a round. You see people climb up to trees. The animals climb up to, certain animals feed off nests of bees' nests where they produce honey. So these could have been bees' nests in the trees, and the honey comes down. When they get full of honey, it would overflow from the nest and come down to the ground.
Okay, so that would be a flowing as well, wouldn't it? All right. Okay. So there's another.
We had beehives earlier on. I can't remember the name of the guy. He married the girl, or didn't marry her, and took her to her father, and then he left, and he came back, and there was something to do with beehives. What was that, Johnny? Not so long ago.
Are you thinking of a Shimshon?
Yeah.
Are you thinking of Shimshon?
Shimshon, yeah.
Shimshon,
he had beehives when he came back.
Yeah, it wasn't a built beehive, as Stuart is in. Where was that beehive that Shimshon found? Where was that bee's nest or hive that Shimshon found?
Just after the forest, wasn't it? Just after when he came out of the forest.
Yeah, but where was it? Where did he find it?
In a lion.
In a lion, that's right, Charlotte. In a dead lion, in the skull of a dead lion.
Right.
Remember, he set a riddle. He set a riddle for the Plishtim of strength and sweetness, and that was all about. And that was the whole business. That was what started the whole business off, because his missus gave away the riddle, and he got all angry about that and started doing what he did. That's right. So that was not a built beehive either. So maybe Stuart is right. Maybe this honey was dripping from the bees' nests in the trees. Either way, it's on the ground. That's the important point. It's on the ground. Now, verse 26 we're just on at the moment, and we've said the people came to the forest, and there was this oozing, this flowing of honey or nectar. Ve'ein masig yado al piv. Nobody put his hand to his mouth. Not because they weren't hungry, or because they didn't fancy the honey. Why? Ki yarei ha'am et hashavua. They feared the oath. Shavua is another word for oath. Allah is a word for oath. That's why Vayoel is an oath, but Shavua is another word for an oath. And they feared the oath. Now, this is interesting to me because, and I think we've spoken about this in the past, I think when we were talking in Sanhedrin maybe, oaths are really, really important in the Torah. a person's word, a person's promise, a person's oath is much more binding, it would seem, in years gone by than it is today. And of course, this is why you must never make an oath in God's name. That's why people, when you go to court, many people will not take an oath. They will rather affirm. And the reason is that even if you're telling the truth, you might make a mistake and you will swear that something happened or that something exists or whatever it is. And you'll be wrong and you will have made a false oath, even if it was not deliberate. People are scared of making false oaths or breaking oaths because oaths are very, very strong. We have the whole parsha in the Torah, which tells us what happens if a person takes an oath or a woman takes an oath and whether his husband can annul it on the day or not annul it or whatever it is. Oaths are really, really important things. One of the 10 commandments, of course, do not take my name in vain. That means don't make an oath. One of the things we say in the Al-Chetz on Yom Kippur is about oaths that we've taken and not kept. Kol Nidrei itself, probably the most emotional night of the year, begins with the annulment of oaths in a very solemn and serious manner. And so here we can understand, if we understand that, we can understand why nobody broke this oath. We also, let's just whiz back a few years in our Shurim and a few hundred years in the story to the story of, in the Sefer Yehoshua, the story of Ai. Do we remember what happened with the story of Ai, the battle of Ai? They lost 36 men. Why did they lose 36 men? Anybody remember? There was an oath, wasn't there, that they were not allowed to take any of the spoils from the place in Jericho. And one person broke that oath. Anybody remember his name? Who was the person that broke the oath, which led to the disaster of Ai? David, help us out.
Achan.
And what did he do? He took some stuff and he buried it underneath his tent. And of course, when the disaster happened at Ai, Yoshua said, "Hey, what's going on? Why have we lost this battle?" And the Kodesh Baruch Hu said to him, "Well, somebody's broken the oath." Achan broke the oath. So oaths can lead, or breaking of oaths can lead to disasters. And the people absolutely believed this oath of Shaul. Shaul was the king, remember? And he says, Aror ha'ish, cursed is the man who is going to do this. So they didn't do it. Nobody, not one person broke that oath. That's quite remarkable, isn't it? How powerful the concept of taking an oath and keeping an oath was then. And in contrast, it's sad how today a man's word is not, what's the expression? His bond. Is that right?
Not his bond.
A man's word should be his bond.
Yeah.
And it was. Those days, an oath was an oath. You didn't mess around.
They say B'li Neder now, though, to get out of it.
Exactly, we say B'li Neder because we don't want to make an oath. Neder is another example of an oath. Of course, Neder is the root, same root as Kol Nidrei, correct. And what do we say in Kol Nidrei? Kol Nidrei, Kol Shavuah, right? That's the Shavuah. It's the same idea. They're all different types of oaths. So here we've got an oath that was taken. Shaul vayoel Shaul, he adjured the people, saying, anybody who eats is going to be put to death, and nobody did. And I think that's worth stopping and pondering on for a second. Except for one person did. And this is what makes the story so great. Let's read on, verse 27.
But Jonathan had not heard when his father adjured the people. So he stretched out the edge of the staff that was in his hand and dipped it into the nectar of the cane. He then brought his hand to his mouth and his eyes lit up.
Okay. So Jonathan had not heard the oath. Why not?
He'd gone on ahead.
Was he not paying attention in class? He hadn't heard what the teacher said.
He'd gone
on ahead, hadn't he?
Yeah, he wasn't in the same place.
Mm.
He had gone up to Michmash. He'd started the battle in Michmash, having gone through the secret path with the craggy rocks on either side that we read about and that Vivian Gilbert read about. He wasn't there. He never got the message. He didn't know he wasn't meant to eat. So what did he do? He dipped the end of his stick in the honey, and that's why it's important that it was on the floor. And he dipped it in and he ate some. And what happened to him? Vata'orna einav, an unusual word. It comes from the word or. Although it's one of those Korean ktivs, it's not written Vata'orna, it's pronounced Vata'orna. You can see on the screen in brackets, it's actually written Vata'rona. The Aleph and the Resh are put the other way around. Vata'orna, as it's said, means he was lightened. Light came to him. In our translation, it says his eyes were brightened. What does the Art Scroll say, Liam?
Looking at
Excuse me, Johnny, in the Steinsaltz, there's no vowels on that word for some reason.
Yeah, that's an indication. That's an indication that it's a Korean negative.
Right.
His eyes.
Oh, yes, in the column it says it. In the column, that's Arana. That's Arana.
Yeah, go on, Leon. What's your translation?
And his eyes lit up.
His eyes lit up. And what have you got, Michael? The same? Okay, so it's from the word or meaning light. But what does Vatarona mean? Vatarona, which is the Resh and the Aleph the other way around. And why have we got a Korean ktiv? Does anybody know that? I don't know. I don't know what Vatarona would mean. But we could do with finding that out, really, couldn't we? Why is there a Korean ktiv? Why is it read differently to the way that it's written? I don't know. I'll have to try and look that up. Okay, we'll come back to it, unless anybody's got any ideas.
No, but there's an interesting thing here in the translation. I'm not sure that it's in the Ivrit. The English says, and dipped it into the nectar of the cane. In other words, it's cane sugar, not honey.
Yes, well, that's consistent with what you said with Rashi, wasn't it? Art Scroll are generally speaking, Art Scroll are consistent with Rashi's pshat. Generally speaking, you'll find that Art Scroll takes the pshat of Rashi. Here, we're not taking the pshat of Rashi because he says honeycomb very clearly, that it was honeycomb. Yeah. I actually like Stuart's explanation the best, that you've got your bee's nest in the tree and the honey is dripping down onto the floor. I like that the best, actually. Either way, Jonathan dipped the apple in the honey, or dipped his cane in the honey, anyway, dipped his stick in the honey, and he ate some. Vata'orna, and his eyes lit up. Rav Steinsaltz says something interesting about this. Johnny, do you want to read what Rav Steinsaltz says about this word, Vata'orna?
I'll see it's where it says it, actually. I'm looking.
In verse 27, right at the bottom.
Yes, I can read. And he was invigorated as honey provides immediate energy.
Yeah, Vata'orna, he says he was invigorated because the honey had given him energy. Of course, honey is very high in sugar, very high in instant energy. If you go to any sports things and you have these instant energy bars, have all got honey in them. Honey is a good source of instant energy, a bit like sugar cane. And maybe that's why Rashi thought it was sugar cane, because it would also give you an instant energy boost with your sugar. So he felt great after this. He was obviously hungry. He'd been battling. He'd been killing people all day long. And he dips his stick in the honey, and he has a taste of the honey, and he feels invigorated. But of course, he didn't know that he wasn't meant to do this. Let's go on and see what happened. Verse 28.
Then one of the people called out and said, "Your father has adjured the people, saying, 'Cursed be the man who eats food today.' And the people have become weary."
Okay. So in the vernacular, Jonathan, it starts to eat this honey, and somebody says, "Oi, what are you doing? Your father said nobody's allowed to eat, and whoever eats will be cursed, or put to death, in fact." Wow, that's a bit of a problem for Jonathan now, isn't it? Bearing in mind that this strength of curse, strength of oath, I mean, that we spoke about a few minutes ago. Jonathan now realizes that he has broken an oath of his father, or he is actually inadvertently broken an oath of his father and has inadvertently made himself the subject of a curse. Now, I'm going to come back to this in a minute, but I want you to think about what that reminds you of. Who else in Tanakh inadvertently made themselves the subject of a curse? We'll come back to it in a minute. Anita's going to tell us in a minute. Hold on to it, Anita. Okay. Hold on to it. How does Jonathan react? Verse 29.
Jonathan said, "My father has distressed the land. See now how my eyes lit up when I tasted just a bit of this nectar.
Carry on.
Surely if the people had eaten today of the spoils of their enemy that they have acquired, would there not now have been an even greater blow against the Philistines?"
So Jonathan, instead of saying, "Oy vey, now I'm in trouble," he criticizes his father and he digs himself a deeper hole. He's in a hole because he's now been cursed by the king inadvertently. And instead of, I don't know, seeking mercy or making an excuse, "I didn't know, I hadn't heard, nobody told me," what did he say? "My father's an idiot. Right? My father has perturbed the land." In other words, he's done something really stupid, because look, I'm invigorated by this honey, and all I had was a little taste. How much more so would it have been if he'd have not said to the people, "Don't eat," but would have allowed them to eat? They'd have had more energy, and they would have been able to kill more Philistines. If you think about it, which army goes out to battle on an empty stomach? Soldiers are not going to want to fight on an empty stomach. So Jonathan is saying, that was a bit stupid of my father to have done that. I don't agree with his policy. Yes, David.
Fight on the stomach, don't they?
On the contrary, back in 73, when we were attacked on Yom Kippur, the first thing that the soldiers had to do was to break their fast. And even today, when either wars that fall on Tanit Tzibur, or when the soldiers are doing a drill, they're commanded by the Rabbonim there that they mustn't fast on a Tanit.
Right. Okay. There's proof of what Jonathan is saying, and also Shane Phillips not here because he would probably be able to confirm this. I recall I recall that my boys, when they were in the army, when they were out in the shetach, as they called it, when they were out in the fields, I'm going to mute everybody because there's a bit of feedback from somebody, so I'm just going to mute everybody. When they were out in the fields, in the shetach, out on not in their bases, they were given extra rations. Their field rations were greater. So this doesn't seem right, and Jonathan is saying this. Why has he done that? This is really not appropriate, what my father has done. Now, the problem with that, of course, is that Shaul is the king, and the king has the power of life and death in his hands. And in fact, there is a halacha. If you are mored b'malchut, if you rebel, the word mered. Have you anyone ever heard that word mered before? You probably have. I'll remind you. Mered bar Kochba. You heard of that? The revolt of Bar Kochba. Mered is a revolt. So if you are mored b'malchut, if you rebel against the king, I think we'd call that word in English, we'd use an old-fashioned word of treason. This was treason, what Jonathan was saying here. It was very foolish of him to have said so. He might have thought it, but he shouldn't have said it, because that is mored b'malchut. That is rebelling against the king, and that alone puts him in danger of the death penalty, because the penalty for a mered neged hamelech, a rebellion against the king, is the death penalty. So that's what he said. Now, Anita, I'll come back to 1 second, Anita. I just wanted to do verse 31, and then we'll talk, go back to the question that I asked Anita a minute ago. Verse 31, Leon. You're muted, Leon.
Yes, I was muted because the lorry that was making the noise is outside our building.
Right.
The people smote the Philistines on that day from Michmas to Ayalon, and the people were very weary.
Okay, we haven't done this for quite a while, but we're going to look at some geography. Ayalon, where's that? Yeah,
the river.
The river Ayalon, yes, there is a river. Marcel, where is Ayalon?
It runs through Tel Aviv.
Okay, but this Ayalon is a different Ayalon, because this is from Michmash to Ayalon. Where was Michmash? We showed you, had the map of Michmash. It was, if you remember, it was northeast of Jerusalem. Okay, that's where Michmash was. This Ayalon has been mentioned before in Tanakh. Where have you heard Ayalon? Where have you heard the place Ayalon? I'll give you a clue. Something to do with the sky. Okay, anyone? Okay, David, can you help us?
I've got the book in front of me, so
Okay.
probably the same source as you.
I haven't got the book in front of me. I just remember the pasuk. Shemesh begivon dom. The sun will stand still in Givon. May the sun stand still in Givon. What's the next bit of the pasuk? Vayareach.
And the moon stood still as well.
Yeah, Vayareach ba'ayalon. And the moon in Ayalon. When we had the story of the sun standing still so that the battle could be completed, that was the sun stood still over Givon, but the moon stood still over Ayalon. And if those of you remember, we spoke about the Ralbag's commentary, who pointed out that it should have been the other way around. Because, well, let me show you the map. Can you see the map on the screen? The Google map? No?
Yes.
Now you can. Okay. There is Michmash. There we go. Muhamas, it's called at the moment in Arabic, but you can see the Hebrew there. Ma'alei Michmash. There is Michmash. There's Jerusalem. As I said, it's northeast. Ayalon is right in the middle. Biblical Ayalon, right in the middle of Canada Park Canada. Okay, you've all been there, I'm sure. It's very close to Latrun. You can see Latrun is over there. Park Canada. Its full name is Ayalon Park Canada. Okay, that's the Ayalon, and that's the place we're talking about. So you can see that Ayalon is west of where we are here. And so when we were talking about Shemesh Begivon Dom, the sun should stand still in over Givon, and the moon over Ayalon should have been the other way around, because Givon is east of Ayalon, and this was at the end of the day, because they were praying that the sun should stand still so that we could finish the battle. It was towards the end of the day. The sun should have been, the sun sets in the west, does it not? In the northern hemisphere, the sun sets in the west. So the sun should have been standing still over Ayalon and the moon over Givon, not the other way around. So that's where we've seen Ayalon in the past. Ayalon is spoken about. It doesn't get the same. Press coverage as the sun standing still over Givon in that battle. Everybody knows that Joshua made the sun stand still, right? But how many people know that Joshua made the moon stand still? Well, he did. It says it in the Pasuk. The moon stood still over Ayalon. So this map here is to show you the Pasuk that we just read, which is no longer on the screen, but I've got it in the front of me in the book. And it says, they smote the Philistines on that day from Michmash to Ayalon. This is where Michmash was. Remember, that's where Jonathan went up. That's where the Plishtim were camped. And they ran away. They all ran away when Jonathan went in there with his armor bearer. And they pursued them and they smote them all the way to Ayalon. Now, look how far it is. I did this deliberately on this map. Okay, they've gone a bit of a roundabout route because they've gone on Route 1. But look how far it is. It's 55 kilometers.
They must have run very fast to get there in a day.
Yeah, so, I mean, let's say they went as the crow flies. Let's say it's, I don't know, 40 kilometers, 30 kilometers even, right? It's a big area. It's a big area. They smote them from Michmash to Ayalon. Now, whether that is meant to be taken literally and literally there, I don't know. But either way, it's a big area. This was a routing of the Plishtim by the troops of Shaul. I wanted to show you that map for two reasons. One, to show you where Ayalon was, and two, to show you the distance between Michmash and Ayalon. And you can see in relation to Yerushalayim exactly where we're talking. Givat Zev is right in the middle there. If they'd have gone as the crow flies, Givat Zev would have been right in their path. As you can see, Ramallah and Psagot are not far away either. So there we go. That's an interesting map to end with. So now we're going to stop there because the next bit is going to talk about what happened with the people after the battle and also what happened to Jonathan's oath. And now I come back to Anita, and I'm going to give you the question again, which Anita is going to give us the answers to. Who else in Tanakh inadvertently made themselves the subject of a curse?
It was Yiftach.
Correct.
And he said the next person who comes out of the house will be slaughtered, will be killed. And it was his daughter.
Yes, correct. The story of Yiftach. very nicely summarized by Anita. Yiftach was the leader, one of the Shoftim, and he said, if God will deliver my enemies into my hand, then the first thing that comes out of my house, I will sacrifice to God. And what he was expecting to see an animal, which he would sacrifice to God. And the first thing that came out was his daughter. And he therefore was now in a position where he'd made an oath to sacrifice his daughter to God. And there you have a parallel, which we're going to return to next week. The parallel between Shaul and Yiftach, and the parallel between Jonathan and the daughter of Yiftach. And it's very, very interesting how this story develops if you keep in mind what happened in Yiftach. So a little bit of homework for you. Go into Shoftim chapter 11 before next week and read up, revise the story of Yiftach, and we will talk about the story of Yiftach and the story of Shaul and Jonathan in our chapter together next week. Let's just summarize what we've done so far. We started at verse 24, and we talked about Shaul making a promise using this word vayoel, and he cursed, meaning that it's a death sentence, and he made them not eat any food. There was honey on the ground, whether that be sugarcane, according to Rashi, or honey from honeycombs, or honey from a tree, as per Stuart. There was honey on the ground. Nobody ate it. They kept to their oath. Jonathan had not heard the oath, and he ate something. And instead of apologizing, Jonathan calls out his father, criticizes his father, and says he was wrong for having done that. Then we finished with the map of Michmash to Ayalon. We mentioned Ayalon being the area where the moon stood still for Joshua during that famous battle where he made the sun stand still over Givon. He also made the moon stand still over Ayalon. Okay, any questions, comments about this week's shiur? Johnny, if you're speaking, I can't hear you, you're muted.
What's the homework? To look up, read up, what did you say?
Read up
Joshua.
The story of Yiftach. Read up the story of Yiftach. It's chapter 11 of Shoftim.
Oh, right, thank you.
Any questions, comments? Okay, Shavua Tov. Shavua Tov. See you on Wednesday.
Shavua Tov, Johnny.
Thank you.
Johnny.
Bye.
Thank you, Johnny.
Shavua Tov. Shavua Tov.